The sun hung low over the Wyoming plains, spilling gold across the land like it was trying to make up for the dust and blood that had already soaked into it. The wind was dry, biting, and it carried with it the faint, coppery smell of something that didn't belong to the prairie: blood. Ethan Cole, a ranch hand known around Fremont County as the Quiet Rider, reined in his chestnut stallion just as the sound of strained breathing reached his ears. "Wait, you're bleeding," he muttered, more to himself than to her. She was lying halfway down the embankment, torn dress, scraped hands, one boot missing. A woman in her 20s, by the look of her, but not from around here. Her face was pale under the dirt, her auburn hair tangled and catching the dying light like fire in the dusk. She looked like she'd fallen out of a dream and landed hard on reality. Ethan swung off his horse, boots hitting the dry earth with a thud. "Don't move," he said, crouching beside her. His voice was steady, the same calm he'd used when a bull broke loose last spring, but his pulse wasn't. Her eyes fluttered open, hazel and fierce despite the pain. "I wasn't planning on it," she rasped. He tore off his bandana, pressing it to the gash on her arm. Blood seeped through almost instantly. "You got thrown?" he asked, glancing toward the ridge. A trail of broken brush hinted at a wagon, or someone running. She shook her head weakly. "No, they pushed me." That word, "they," hit him harder than he expected. This wasn't some lost traveler. Trouble had followed her here. He tightened the makeshift bandage and looked her in the eyes. "Who are they?" She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. "Men from Laramie. They think I took something." "And did you?" he asked, though he wasn't sure why. Her gaze met his, steady now. "Yes." That was the first twist. Ethan didn't move, didn't ask what it was. He just lifted her onto his horse and swung up behind her. The horizon was already darkening, and the wind had shifted, carrying not just the scent of blood now, but of rain. He rode for the ranch, the woman's weight slumped against him, her breath shallow. By the time they reached the porch, thunder was crawling across the plains. "Get Doc Miller," Ethan called out as soon as he entered. The old ranch hand, Jed, shuffled from the kitchen, eyebrows raised. "Who the hell's this?" "Just get the doc," Ethan said, setting her down on the couch. Jed didn't argue. He'd known Ethan long enough to trust that tone, the one that meant this wasn't open for discussion. When the doctor arrived, Ethan stood by the window, arms folded, watching lightning flicker in the distance. The doc cleaned and stitched the wound while the woman bit down on a piece of leather. Not once did she cry out. Finally, when it was over, the doctor wiped his hands and said, "She'll live, but she needs rest." "Who is she?" Ethan looked down at her, already asleep, chest rising and falling slow and steady. "I don't know," he said quietly. But that wasn't true. He knew enough. He knew that whoever she was, his quiet life had just ended. By morning, the rain had stopped, and the plains were clean again, washed of dust but not of what had happened. Ethan made coffee while she slept, the smell of roasted beans cutting through the stillness. When she finally stirred, her voice was soft. "Where am I?" "Cole Ranch," he said without turning. "You're safe, for now." She sat up slowly, wincing. "For now." Ethan poured her a tin cup of coffee and handed it to her. "You said men were after you. That tends to make things temporary." Her hands shook as she took the cup. "They won't stop," she said. "Not until they find me." "Then you best tell me what they're looking for." She hesitated. "You wouldn't believe me." "Try me." She took a breath, eyes darting to the window like she half expected to see someone standing there. "It's a ledger," she said finally. "Names, numbers, payoffs to the governor's men. My father kept it. He was the accountant for Laramie Mining Company." Ethan frowned. "Mining company? Thought they shut down years ago." "They did. After they buried 30 men alive in a shaft collapse. My father found out it wasn't an accident. They covered it up. When he refused to burn the books, they killed him." Ethan's jaw clenched. "And you?" "I ran. Took the ledger. Been running since." The coffee between them went cold. Outside, a hawk circled lazy and high, oblivious to the danger rolling over the plains like thunder reborn. He could have told her to leave. Should have. But something in the way she met his gaze, no fear, just exhaustion and defiance, made that impossible. "You can stay here," he said finally. "For now." She gave a small nod. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Clara," she said. "Clara Whitmore." He gave a slow nod. "Ethan Cole." And that was the start of something neither of them could stop. even if they wanted to. The next few days moved like a storm waiting to break. Clara helped around the ranch, her arm wrapped in clean bandages, her hair tied back with one of Ethan's spare kerchiefs. She was quiet, but not timid. When she laughed, rare but real, it filled the wide emptiness of the ranch with something Ethan hadn't heard in years. But there was tension under it all. Ethan noticed the tracks near the creek, 2 horses, shod, coming from the south. He said nothing to Clara at first, just made sure his rifle stayed loaded. That night, the air was heavy, the kind of stillness that meant something was coming. Ethan sat on the porch, hat tipped low, a cigarette burning between his fingers. Clara stepped out behind him, wrapped in his old duster. "You're expecting them," she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. "You ever shot a gun?" She hesitated. "Once. Didn't like it." "You might have to again." Lightning flashed on the horizon, and for a moment, her face was illuminated, soft, scared, and stubborn all at once. "I won't run this time," she said. He looked at her then, really looked. "Didn't figure you would." By dawn, the riders came. 2 of them, long coats, revolvers at their hips, eyes cold as the land itself. Ethan was waiting. "Morning," he said, stepping out from the porch as they approached. "Morning," one replied, tipping his hat. "We're looking for someone. Lot of people come through here," Ethan said. "You'll have to be more specific." "She's got red hair. Pretty. Carries something that don't belong to her." Ethan's hand hovered near his holster. "Ain't seen her." The man smiled thinly. "Mind if we take a look around?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "I do." The silence that followed was the kind that cuts through bone. Then the man's hand twitched, and before he could draw, Ethan's Colt was out. One shot. Clean. The other man reached for his gun, but a blast from the porch stopped him cold. Clara, hands trembling, smoke rising from the barrel of Ethan's Winchester. Both men hit the ground. Ethan turned slowly toward her. "Guess you can shoot after all." She was shaking, tears in her eyes. "I didn't want to," she whispered. "I know." He took the rifle from her gently, setting it aside. Then, for the first time since his wife had died 3 years ago, he pulled someone into his arms. She didn't resist. Outside, the thunder broke again, and rain began to fall, slow at first, then steady, washing away the blood, the dust, and everything else that had come before. But the quiet didn't last. Days later, word spread. 2 dead men near Cole Ranch. Questions followed. Sheriff Daniels rode up asking if Ethan had seen anything suspicious. Ethan lied, said they were drifters who tried to steal his cattle. The sheriff didn't believe him, but he let it slide. Clara knew it couldn't last. "They'll send more," she said one night, sitting by the fire. "Bigger men. Men who won't stop." Ethan poured whiskey into 2 glasses. "Then we make sure they don't find what they're looking for." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "You'd help me? After all this?" He took a long drink. "Lady, you bled on my floor. That's about as close to family as it gets out here." Weeks turned into months. Together, they hid the ledger, worked the ranch, and tried to pretend the rest of the world didn't exist. The bond between them deepened, not fast, but steady, like a campfire growing from embers into flame. Ethan taught her how to ride properly, how to handle a rifle, how to brand cattle. She taught him how to laugh again. But behind every sunrise, there was the shadow of what was coming. The man who ran the mining company, Silas Reed, had built his empire on lies, and Clara's ledger was the one thing that could burn it all down. He sent bounty hunters, bribed lawmen, even hired Pinkertons. And they were closing in. The night they came was colder than most. Clara woke to the sound of hoofbeats, too many to be friendly. Ethan was already up, rifle in hand. "Stay inside," he said. "I'm not hiding," she shot back. He looked at her, fierce, stubborn, alive, and something in him broke. "You stay with me, then." They fought side by side. Gunfire tore through the night, echoing off the canyon walls. Ethan took one in the shoulder, but kept shooting. Clara hit another man clean through the leg. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. When the smoke cleared, only one rider remained, Silas Reed himself. Gray hair, expensive coat, the arrogance of a man who thought the law was something that happened to other people. "You think you can hide from me?" Silas snarled. "You think one cowboy and a scared girl can take down an empire?" Ethan raised his rifle. "Ain't no empire worth killing for." But before he could shoot, Silas fired, and Ethan went down. Clara screamed. Something inside her snapped. She ran forward, grabbed Ethan's Colt, and fired. One shot, right between Silas's eyes. Then, silence. She dropped the gun and fell beside Ethan. "Don't you die on me," she whispered, tears falling onto his face. "Don't you dare." He coughed, blood on his lips, eyes half open. You're the stubbornest woman I ever met." "You're not dying," she said again, pressing her hand against the wound. He smiled faintly. "Guess I don't got time for that." And somehow, by miracle or willpower, he didn't. Months later, after the Pinkertons came and found the ledger, after Silas Reed's company was dismantled and the governor resigned in disgrace, Ethan and Clara stood on the porch of the ranch watching the sunrise. She rested her head on his shoulder, the scar on his arm a reminder of everything they'd survived. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. He looked at the horizon, endless, golden, alive. "Every damn day." And he turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I think we already found it." The wind carried the scent of sage and rain across the plains. The land was quiet again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full of love, of loss, of second chances. And as the sun rose higher, Ethan Cole, the cowboy who once thought his life ended in silence, kissed the woman who taught him it was only just beginning. The next morning, Ethan saddled his horse before the sun cleared the ridge. Clara came out onto the porch, hair still loose, shawl pulled tight against the chill. "You're riding out," she said. "Gonna talk to Sheriff Daniels," Ethan answered. "See who's been passing through town. Letter like that doesn't show up without somebody leaving a trail. I'm coming." He met her eyes, already knowing he wasn't going to win that argument. "You stay close," he said, and she nodded once. They rode the 15 miles into town in silence. The main street was waking up, storefront doors opening, a wagon creaking under sacks of grain, the clatter of hooves on the boards outside the saloon. Daniels was out front of his office, coffee mug in one hand, cigar in the other. "Cole," he said, looking up. "Heard you've been keeping quiet since the Reed mess." Ethan tossed him the folded letter. Daniels read it, jaw tightening. "You make enemies easy, don't you? Was hoping you'd tell me which one sent this." Daniels rubbed his chin. "I seen that mark before. Circle with a line, used by the old Reed contractors. Smugglers who ran silver out of the mountains. After Reed went down, the rest of M's scattered east. Heard one of M's set up near Medicine Bow. Calls himself Brant." Clara frowned. "You think he's the one?" Daniels shrugged. "If he ain't, he's close enough to smell it." Ethan took the letter back. "Appreciate it, Sheriff." "You going after him?" Daniels asked. "Seems like he's coming after us either way." Daniels exhaled smoke. "Then you better be faster." They left town before noon, following the old freight road north. The land turned rougher, pines closing in over the trail. Toward evening, they reached the remains of an old mining camp, collapsed shacks, a rusted boiler half buried in gravel. Clara dismounted, running her fingers along the charred wood. "This must have been Reed's," she whispered. Ethan studied the ground. Tracks, fresh ones, cut through the dust. Not horses, wagon wheels, heavy load. "Someone's still using this road," he said. They followed the tracks deeper into the canyon until the smell of smoke hit them. Rounding a bend, they saw it, a small camp beside the river, 3 men, rifles propped against rocks, a fire burning low. And above the fire, hanging from a branch, was a black flag painted with that same circle and line. Ethan motioned Clara down. "Stay low." But she shook her head. "If that's Brant, I need to hear what he wants." He gave her a hard look. "And if what he wants is you, then you'll have to be faster again." She slipped out before he could stop her. Ethan swore under his breath, then circled wide, moving through the rocks until he had a clear angle. Clara stepped into the open. "Looking for me?" The men jerked up, hands going to their guns. The one in the middle, a tall man with a black coat and silver hair, smiled. "Miss Whitmore, thought you might save me the trouble of knocking." "You Brant?" she asked. "Name still holds weight, I see. You got something belongs to me." "The ledger." He laughed softly. "Ledger, evidence, whatever you call it. That little book tore down a company worth millions. You think that ends with Reed?" She kept her voice steady. "If you want it, you'll have to come and take it." Brant's smile vanished. "Oh, I intend to." He raised his hand, signaled to his men. The first one went down before he could draw. Ethan's shot cracked through the canyon. Chaos erupted. Clara dove for cover as bullets sparked against stone. Ethan moved fast, shifting positions, counting shots. 2 more went down before Brant realized where the fire was coming from. The older man grabbed Clara, pressing his revolver against her temple. "Cole," he shouted, "throw the gun, or she dies." Ethan froze, sweat running down his face, gun still aimed. His heart pounded hard enough to drown the wind. "Don't," Clara gasped. Ethan's voice dropped to a calm, deadly whisper. "You don't want to do that." Brant sneered. "You think I won't?" Ethan stepped out slowly, lowering his rifle. "I think you forgot how close you're standing to a fighter." Clara slammed her heel into his shin, twisted, grabbed his wrist, and shoved the gun aside as it fired. The shot went wild. Ethan's second round hit Brant clean through the chest. Brant staggered back, eyes wide. Reed wasn't the only one. He choked, then collapsed into the dirt. Silence fell again, broken only by the river and Clara's breathing. Ethan dropped to one knee beside her. "You all right?" She nodded, trembling. "You could have been killed." He gave a half-smile. "So could you." They stood there a long moment, wind whistling through the canyon, the smell of gunpowder fading. When it was gone, Ethan reached for her hand. "Let's go home," he said. That night back at the ranch, they buried the letter in the stove fire and watched it burn. Clara leaned against him, exhausted. "Do you think it's really over?" Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Out here, nothing's ever over. But we're still standing. That counts for something." She closed her eyes, resting her head against his chest. The steady rhythm of his heartbeat was the only sound. Outside, the wind moved through the grass like the whisper of a world finally letting them breathe again. Days passed, and the tension from Brant's threats slowly began to fade, though neither Ethan nor Clara pretended it had vanished completely. Life on the ranch returned to its rhythm. Cattle grazing, fences mended, the occasional gust of wind carrying dust across the plains. Yet every shadow, every distant hoofbeat reminded them of what had come and what could return. Clara rose with the sun, carrying water to the barn, the simple tasks grounding her in a way nothing else had. Ethan watched her from the porch, a quiet pride welling up inside him. She moved like someone who belonged to the land, strong and sure, but with a vulnerability that only he seemed to see. "You know," he said one morning, joining her at the barn, "I thought I'd seen every kind of danger this land could throw at me. Turns out it was just preparing me for you." She laughed softly, brushing hay from her hands. "That's so." "Yeah," he said, catching her gaze. "You've got a way of turning everything upside down, including me." Clara stepped closer, warmth radiating in the early light. "And you don't mind?" "Not one bit," he said, cupping her face. Their lips met briefly, a spark that felt like it could ignite the whole prairie. Weeks turned into months. The summer sun baked the earth, the ranch flourished, and the bond between them deepened. They shared quiet evenings under the stars, talking about nothing and everything, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. They learned each other's rhythms, when to fight, when to stay quiet, when to just hold on. But peace, Ethan knew, had a habit of testing those who earned it. One late afternoon, as the sky bled gold and red, Clara noticed movement along the ridge, shadows shifting just beyond the tree line. She nudged Ethan, eyes narrowing. "You see that?" Ethan followed her gaze, hand moving instinctively toward his rifle. "Stay behind me." 2 figures emerged, cautious but deliberate, horses low and ready. Ethan recognized the gait immediately, bounty hunters. Not reckless men like Brant, but calculated, patient, lethal. "They're looking for something," he muttered. "Or someone," Clara said, gripping his arm. Ethan nodded. "Time to make sure they find nothing." They spent the night preparing. Barricades at the barn, hidden vantage points along the ridge, rifles ready and pistols loaded. Clara's hands were steady, her breathing measured. She had changed. From the scared woman he found bleeding on the plains to someone who could face death without flinching. When the hunters rode in, dusk already thickening into night, Ethan and Clara were ready. A volley of warning shots echoed across the plains, and chaos erupted. Horses reared, men shouted, and dust flew like smoke from a cannon. Ethan and Clara moved with precision, covering each other's blind spots. The fight was brutal, relentless. One of the hunters fell to Clara's rifle. Another was caught in a trap Ethan had set. The last one tried to flee on foot, only to stumble into the canyon rocks. Silence fell again, heavy and complete. Clara exhaled, eyes wide but resolute. That's the last of them, right? Ethan lowered his rifle, face streaked with sweat and grime. For now, they walked back toward the ranch, the prairie open and quiet around them. The stars were beginning to pierce the night sky, and for a moment, it felt like the world belonged only to them. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Clara rebuilt not just the ranch, but their lives together. They laughed more freely, shared meals by the fire, and explored the hills and valleys around the property, sometimes riding for hours with no destination other than each other's company. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in shades of fire, Ethan found Clara sitting on the porch railing, gazing across the plains. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked, voice barely above the wind. He joined her, settling close. "I think about it every day. And I think we already found it," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face and leaning in. Their kiss was slow, tender, a promise and a vow at once. The wind whispered across the prairie, carrying the scent of sage and rain, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt right. Months turned into seasons. Winter brought snow and long nights, but with it came the warmth of shared fire and quiet companionship. Clara and Ethan worked side by side, mending fences, tending the herd, and learning the subtle rhythms of life together. Their love had grown through fire and blood, and it now thrived in the simple acts of everyday survival. One morning, Clara woke to find a small bundle on the porch, a note tied with a leather cord. Ethan had left it for her while she slept. She opened it to find a hand-drawn map of the valley, with a single line pointing to a hilltop. Curious, she followed it and found Ethan waiting, a soft grin on his face. "I thought you might like a reminder," he said, gesturing to the wide-open vista below them. "Of everything we've survived and everything we have yet to see." Clara leaned into him, eyes bright. "We're really doing it, aren't we?" "We are," he said, holding her tight. "We survived the plains, the men, the storms. Nothing can touch us now." For the first time, they didn't need to fight. The world could wait. They had each other, the land, and the knowledge that together they could face anything. The sun rose behind them, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted plains. It was a new day, full of promise, hope, and the kind of love forged only in fire. Ethan kissed Clara's forehead. "Here's to us," he said. "And everything to come," she whispered. They stood there, side by side, letting the wind carry away the ghosts of the past. For the first time, the horizon didn't seem endless. It seemed theirs. Spring returned to the plains like a promise kept. The snow melted, streams swelled with crystal water, and the ranch buzzed with renewed life. The cattle were healthy, the fences sturdy, and the fields tilled and ready. It was a season of growth, not just for the land, but for Ethan and Clara. Clara moved through the property with a confidence she hadn't possessed when Ethan first found her bleeding on the plains. She rode with ease, laughed freely, and took on the chores without hesitation. But more than that, she carried herself like someone who had found a place where she belonged, and someone who had finally found a heart to call home. Ethan watched her from the porch one morning, sunlight catching her hair, dust motes swirling around her like golden sparks. He realized, quietly and completely, that life before Clara was a half-life, an emptiness he'd filled only with work and solitude. Now, with her at his side, every sunrise was brighter, every night quieter, and every silence warm instead of hollow. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Clara asked suddenly, shading her eyes as she looked toward the horizon. Ethan shook his head. "Why would I? The world's out there, but out here, it's ours." She smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made his chest tighten. "I think I like ours." He stepped off the porch, closing the distance between them. "Then we keep it," he said softly, taking her hand in his. "We keep it safe. We live it. We love it." Clara leaned into him, and for a long moment, the world narrowed to that single heartbeat, the warmth of his hand, the steady rhythm of his presence. Weeks later, they were surveying the north pasture when Clara spotted something unusual along the tree line. A foal, small and trembling, caught in the tangle of brush. Without hesitation, she rode toward it, Ethan close behind. Carefully, they freed the creature, soothing it, checking for injuries. The foal nuzzled Clara's shoulder, and she laughed, a sound that rang out like silver bells over the plains. Seems we've got a new addition to the family, Ethan said, brushing hay from her hair as she turned to him. She looked up, eyes shining. We do. And he's lucky we found him. Ethan smiled, his gaze sweeping across the open land. Like us. That evening, as the sun bled orange and red across the horizon, they rode together, the wind catching their hair and the plains stretching endlessly around them. Clara rested her head against Ethan's shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her waist, steady and sure. There was no fear, no threat, no shadow from the past, only the present, alive and real. You ever think about the future? She asked softly, tracing a finger along the saddle horn. All the time, Ethan replied. But it's not frightening anymore. Not with you. They rode until the stars pricked the sky, riding in silence, letting the night absorb their whispered words, their laughter, their shared breaths. It was a quiet intimacy, the kind earned through storms and danger, through fire and blood. By the time they returned to the ranch, fireflies glimmered in the tall grass. Ethan lit a lantern, and they stood together on the porch, looking out across the land they had fought for, bled for, and learned to love. I think this is what we were meant for, Clara said, her hand finding his. I know it, Ethan said. No one else, no other place. Just us, right here. They leaned into each other, kissed beneath the stars, letting the night enfold them. Around them, the prairie whispered with the gentle sounds of life. Cattle lowing in the distance, wind through the pines, the soft murmur of the river. Everything they had fought for, everything they had lost, had brought them to this moment. Months passed, and the ranch grew even stronger. They planted orchards, repaired the old barn, and built a cabin by the river for quiet evenings away from the work. Life was hard. Yes, the plains never gave without effort, but for the first time, Ethan and Clara didn't dread it. They welcomed it, together. One crisp autumn evening, as the golden light washed over the hills, Ethan took Clara's hand and led her to the hilltop overlooking the ranch. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of sage and autumn leaves. I want you to remember this, he said softly. No matter what comes next, no matter what storms we face. Clara rested her head on his chest, eyes closed. I will. We'll face it together, he finished, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Below them, the ranch sprawled in quiet majesty, the herds grazing, the river winding through the valley, the cabin smoke curling toward the sky. Above them, the first stars began to appear, twinkling like tiny promises. Clara looked up at him, her smile radiant in the twilight. We've earned this, haven't we? Ethan nodded. Every bit of it. And we'll keep earning it, every day. They stood there for a long while, letting the wind carry away the ghosts of the past. Finally, hand in hand, they descended the hill, walking toward the life they had fought to claim, toward the home they had built together. And as the stars burned brighter overhead, the prairie seemed to sigh, not with endings, but with beginnings. Ethan and Clara had survived the storms, the danger, the blood and fire of the past. Now, with the plains stretching endlessly before them, they had something worth fighting for. Each other, love that had been forged in the harshest fires, and a future that was theirs alone. The prairie was quiet, the wind gentle, the night alive with life. And for the first time in a long time, everything was exactly as it should be. Ethan kissed Clara once more, soft and tender, and whispered, "We're home." Clara smiled, eyes shining. Yes, we're home. And together, beneath the vast western sky, they stepped into the promise of tomorrow, a life of love, hope, and endless horizons stretching forever.